1060 City Hall, 1 p.m., 200 North Spring Street, Los Angeles, California, 90012.
Mr. Chair, would you like to take items 1 through 4 at the same
I
time?
would like to first continue to the next meeting, item 5.
Very good.
Okay. Yes, items 1 through 4.
Items 1 through 4 are reappointments to the Affordable Housing Commission and Commission for Community and Family Services. Mr. Pete Navarro to the Affordable Housing Commission, Ms. Peggy Hill, Ms. Jacqueline Hawthorne, and Ms. Ingrid Estrada to the Commission for Community and Family Services.
Can we get all 4 to come up? Move that chair there. Are the other appointees here? So I've got Pete Navarro, Peggy Hill, Jacqueline Hawthorne, and Ms. Ingrid Estrada. Are they here? Hi, ma'am. You want to identify yourself? Okay, great. Okay, Mr. Navarro, you want to introduce yourself to us and tell us, since this is a reappointment, how your experiences have served you and what we're doing, what you think we could be doing better.
Okay, my name is Pete Navarro. I've been on the commission for a few years now. My interest lies in the area of preservation of affordable housing as protected by our rent stabilization ordinance. No matter how much we build, affordable housing units we build, we can't keep pace with those that are taken off the market through decontrol. Our commission has gone on record as supporting measures recommending that we take a look at those sacred cows in the legislature, the Alice Act and the Costa-Hawkins Act, to tweak them, to amend them in a way which we believe are moderate ways. We know that their efforts in the past have failed, but the situation has never been as bad as it is now. So, and that's where my interest lies, and I would hope that government can, local government can make some waves with the state in order to amend the Alice Act and the Costa-Hawkins Act. That's pretty much where my interest lies.
Okay,
If you want some specifics, I can give you some specific recommendations.
Colleagues? Mr. Fuentes? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Hawthorne. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Hawthorne, and I sit before you requesting reappointment to the commission. I filled an unexpired term. This will be my first full term. And when I came on the commission, my concern was that sitting around this room were 15 diverse, educated, established people who were mostly being used as a rubber stamp of the process that was in place. And I thought we should be doing more, especially since our mission is to lift families out of poverty. I have a particular interest in homelessness. And so based on my concern, as well as some of the other concerns, we wanted to be more than a rubber stamp. So we have formed a strategic planning subcommittee where we're really going to get deeply involved and use our talents to the best of our ability. Homelessness is my concern, and this is a living example of how much I'm concerned about homelessness. One couple at our church is homeless right now. This is their son. He is my godson now, and he's with me Monday through Friday, day and night, because they are essentially homeless. They're living in their RV. He's a barber, and he has very entrepreneurially changed it into a mobile barbershop, leaving very little living space in it. And that's why this little precious one is with me.
What's his name?
Out. His name is Damon. But I'm very
Damon. Damon. I have that effect on kids.
Yes. And
Welcome.
He's well loved. His parents love him. Even though I'm keeping him 5 days a week and nights a week, they come and they see him. She comes at night and feeds him and bathes him and puts him to bed. So he's just full of love. But homelessness is a concern of mine. And I would like to stay on the commission to do something about that, to help the mayor, help the city council do something about that.
Great. Alex? Okay, motion to accept. Can we do all four at one time?
Yes.
Without objection? Motion? Second. So moved. Second. No objection?
Okay, Mr. Chair, that takes us to item 6. Would you like to?
Public comment?
Oh,
I can get up.
Yes, ma'am. Committee members, before you move on, are you also approving items 2 and 3, Peggy Hill
Yes,
and...
1 through 4.
I'm sorry, 2 and 4?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
1 through 4.
Thank you.
We have a public comment. Patricia McAllister.
Okay. Now, I don't personally know Mr. Navarro, but I have his resume here, and I have problems with him being on the commission. He is an attorney, and he was an attorney for the Mexican American Bar Association. And as you know, I am against illegal aliens living in affordable housing. I do know that when the illegal women cross this border, they have children, they do get welfare, they get subsidized housing, they get education, they get everything that Americans get. And I think that he may be the attorney that's helping them stay in these affordable housing units. We don't need that on the Affordable Housing Commission. So I am against his appointment. I don't think we need any lawyers. He's worked for the ACLU. He's a very strong attorney, and I believe he's the one that's keeping these illegals in these housing units. So I'm against his appointment. Everybody else looks okay to me. Thank you.
Next.
would you like to move to item 6, Mr. Chair? Item 6 is an HCID verbal report relative to affordable housing preservation initiatives, specifically as they relate to covenant expirations or terminations of rental assistance contracts.
Yes. Rush, why don't you join us here in the middle? Okay. Did you see this, the report? Challenge, though.
Good afternoon, council members. Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing and Community Investment Department. I'm joined by Lamano Lem as well as Franklin Campos from the department. We're here to provide an update where we are relative to preservation. As Mr. Navarro stated, we've got a crisis on our hands, and preserving not only the units that are subject to the rent stabilization ordinance, which is about 85% of the housing stock, we also have a grave concern relative to preserving affordable housing units, those with covenants that are recorded that expire. Through February of this year, we've got approximately 13,500 units that are at risk. And what I mean by at risk, those covenants can expire within the next 5 years. Those 13,500 units are within 394 buildings. Now, I must say that of those numbers, 68% are federally subsidized, usually meaning that they have project-based vouchers associated with those facilities. So they usually renew on an annual basis or sometimes 5 or 20 years. We don't consider those typically to be truly the most at risk. They typically will renew on an annualized basis. So what we're really looking at is a balance, 32% of the housing stock of those 13,500. So what we're looking at are about 146 units, totaling about 4,300 units that are truly at risk. And just give you kind of a snapshot of what we've lost since July of 2013. We've lost approximately 1,400 units that were within about 85 buildings. The number of units within the buildings can vary, so we don't typically reference the buildings because it can be a real high number or a low number. It doesn't really make a difference because you can have an entire building that has project-based vouchers, or you can have one building with one unit. So it varies. But at the same time, while we lost 1,400 units, through our efforts at the department, we're able to save approximately 1,235 units, both through financial and non-financial means. That's through the outreach that we've done, as well as working to refinance projects that we have in place right now. As you know, when the CRA dissolved, we inherited quite a number of covenants, approximately 28,000 additional covenants. They were in various types of housing, some of which were mission-driven organizations that had built those properties. Others were market rate housing units buildings, where units were purchased by the former redevelopment agency for affordability. They were not mission-driven. They were just market-rate housing units, and as they expired, we were looking to potentially save those projects or those units by purchasing or extending those covenants. For the first time, the department actually has a team now dedicated solely to preservation. It's the two gentlemen sitting to either side of me. This is the first time the department's ever had, or the city's ever had that, where we have dedicated staff solely looking at all of the units that are expiring. We have a database that tracks all the units and the properties, and now we do outreach through letters, emails, and calls. We're basically, in essence, cold calling these property owners and property managers to see if we can find out what their motivations are with those properties, and see if there's means by which that we can potentially negotiate a purchase to extend those covenants. Those properties that we deal with can vary according to their financial structure, some of which have no debt whatsoever, others have debt. What we have found through our negotiations with these property owners, in particular within Council District 1, where we were allocated approximately $9 million of former redevelopment non-housing bond fees or proceeds, we were not successful as we thought we would be in negotiating the extension of those covenants. These were market rate properties. They had been covenanted for a number of years, and the property owners were not interested in extending those covenants. Didn't matter what the purchase price was, some of which are anxious to go to market rate housing. Others are anxious to sell, and a third group are thinking about it. Their timeframes are different than ours. Obviously,
any percentage willing to
no. Well, now I'm going to get to that, Councilman, because it's really what we have found, and this kind of lessons learned that we'll get right into is that those properties that have no debt, if they're not a mission-driven organization, primarily they are not interested. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't necessarily. We're not going to stop pushing or trying to persuade them, but at some point, we have to move on and concentrate our efforts on other properties. One of the issues that we do have is that the former redevelopment agency dollars have a requirement for 55-year covenants. And if you're a property owner that has expiring covenants, you may want to extend for a few years to get that guaranteed income, but certainly you don't want to commit yourself to 55 years. So that's been one of the drawbacks of utilizing that source of money. And the same would hold true with any other federal dollars if we're going to try to negotiate that. We would have a better opportunity, say for instance, with general fund dollars. The mayor's the department's budget has approximately $2.5 million that we earmarked and put into the preservation portfolio so that we can start trying to negotiate with those more flexible dollars that we can perhaps purchase those covenants, extending them to 10 to 20 years versus that of the federal requirement or the CRA requirement of 55 years. We're hoping that perhaps we can make a dent in those properties. But we are, yeah, go ahead.
Just so with the CRA, then we would have to get legislation to make that money more flexible.
Exactly.
Is there a number? Is it that works? Is it 5 years, 10? 25?
I'd say 5 to 10 years would be the sweet spot for us. Certainly for those that are market rate developers, they would make sense for them because that's a dedicated source of dollars, but it doesn't commit them to long-term commitments of restraining those units.
So the challenge today then is getting that money to become flexible.
Yes, it would be.
So then your negotiations, you were stuck with saying, would you like to make a 55-year commitment?
You're talking about a long-term commitment. It makes it very challenging. Yeah. So we're revisiting some of those with the general funds because the general funds just recently became available. What we're finding more success, though, are those that actually have debt on them, whether it be debt from us or they're bond financing, where we can negotiate a forgiveness of interest in exchange for extension of the covenants or refinancing so that we can do some rehabilitation and extend those covenants at the same time. So the team here has this database, and they're actively doing the cold calling, if you will, mailing solicitations and reaching out to these property owners and property managers to see what the interest level is. And it's really, each negotiation is different because the motivations of those property owners are different. So like I said, some are mission driven, some are not. So it's trying to figure out what their price points are and then negotiate some sort of buy down for those extensions of the covenants. where we'll need resources would be on the, if we need to do some sort of rehab on those properties, and that could be done through some bond financing, which is pretty much our bread and butter as far as preservation. We don't necessarily need a huge dollar amount for those projects that have debt in them, because we have that latitude. Also, if those properties are non-compliant, say for instance with their covenants on the tenants' income levels, there's ways that we can negotiate that and get them to extend their covenants based on their non-compliance.
What's the percentage of the mix
Of
of those two, of the ones that we could change the 55 years down to 10, and then the ones that have debt? What's the percentage?
Well, the majority of actually do have debt. I'm spitballing here. I'd say about 75 to 80% have debt. The remaining balance do not. But I will say also that even if we're able to get the term for the CRA bond proceeds down from 55 to say 5 to 10, it would be helpful. But again, it's only going to be helpful for the former redevelopment area in which those bonds were issued for. So it's a smaller area. So I just want to make sure that was made clear. But it would provide us more flexibility. Obviously, the general funds we do have provide staff greater flexibility when negotiating these transactions. But majority of the portfolio does have debt, and that's what we're really targeting. We worked with a consultant to help us prioritize these projects, and so we've got our 150 some odd properties that we now know that have some form of loan from us or used to have loans from us. That becomes our target point. So rather than waiting for the last year as we used to, just responding to properties where we know their units are expiring within a year that the state requires them to make the notification, we're being proactive, reaching out to the property owners 3, 4, and 5 years in advance, so that we're exhausting all means by which, by the time they get to that year, we know where they are at that point, and we've exhausted all means to be able to negotiate and extend those covenants. We also work very closely with a contractor, CES, that helps us on the outreach to the tenants, so that they're advised of their rights as well. And in some instances, the CES and their efforts has also been very helpful to galvanize the tenants to let them understand what their rights are, and perhaps even negotiate with the property owners to their desire to keep the tenants or the rent levels as they are. So it's worked out in several ways, and we're looking to expand that contract as well, because that's proven to be very successful. So by and large, we don't have a lot of success stories for you today relative to, say, the former redevelopment dollars, but we've got the mechanism in place now. We're head high in a number of different negotiations with existing properties that we're fairly positive we'll be able to get extensions on those, and that'll become the model as we go forward, primarily through bond financing, recapitalization, so that we can extend those covenants, get some rehab done, and save these units. And we have, for your information, we do have the latest numbers by council district. We'll hand those out to the committee members.
So 70% you're positioned to negotiate.
I believe, and I can get back to you with that number.
And then about 30% we need to go and make that money more flexible.
Correct.
And then we've got a pot from the mayor that gives us the greatest flexibility for other cats and dogs.
Yes,
other
exactly.
Litz and nets in any space.
One thing we ran into, Councilman, when it came to that 30% or the investor-owned properties, a lot of those owners are really looking at estate planning at this point in time. So going 55 years is not going to work.
Right.
They're a living trust. They're thinking, I got to leave this to my grandkids. I don't think 55 years is going to work. And that's what I've been running into left and right.
Okay, that's helpful.
So this goes back to finding out what the interests are of the property owner, what are their motivations, and try to work with them on a case-by-case basis. So it's not a cookie-cutter approach that we can come back to you and say, this is the exact way to do it for every single property. It's going to differ from project to project.
You know, the state's very interested in this.
Yes.
We were up there recently, and so maybe we can get some trailer language that just gives us that flexibility, because they've got some matching programs. Our goal was to figure out what matching programs that we had, and this seems to be one of them. Covenants, extension of covenants was in the assembly side, right? Yeah. So if we can just get trailer bill language through the speaker, then that can get done, and could be done by budget, and the budget, which would be 6 weeks now, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah. Sooner. Senator, I'm sorry.
Appreciate the report. Apologize for being just a little late. I know that it sounds like we have like a pecking order now, at least, some kind of a priority order. I know that these covenants have been expiring the last several years, right? And so what happens to the ones that expired in 13 and 14, that we just sort of throw our hands up on those, or can we still have some conversations, or what's the...
Well, there can be some conversations, but I'd like Franklin to speak to what happens to the actual tenants and what provisions are in place.
Definitely. So over the last 10 years, the city has been funding work for preservation, the tracking, but also tenant outreach and education. So the ultimate goal of the work here is to prevent displacement. So we do have an outreach consultant that does that type of work, and I work to track all of the properties that they're deployed and they're sent to all of these properties just to make sure that the residents have been provided with the proper notification, and if there's any issues, we will also work with the city attorney to deal with any situation, but the intent is to prevent displacement. And so far, we've been able to identify properties that have issues and actually prevent tenants from moving out.
And majority of them are still subject to the rent stabilization ordinance. So there still are some provisions there to protect the rights of the tenants, as well as for displacement, as well as, of course, the increase in the rent levels.
But procedurally, what happens? The covenant expires on the 30th of June, and then, the tenant can be kicked out, or he's got a year, he's got 6 months, he's got a week. What's the process for the property owner who wants to, say, not to renew the covenant and go market?
It all depends on the primary source of funding and restriction. For example, if it's a HUD project-based Section 8, which is probably the largest number of units, there is renewal mechanisms for those properties, but when the owners decide to terminate, by federal law, they're required to provide notification to the city, the residents, and it's a one-year notification. But there's also tenant protection mechanisms for those residents. They're not guaranteed, but there's tenant protections. In terms of the
So in terms of those notifications, have they been trickling in to the city, or we really haven't gotten any yet, or there's a flood coming?
Right now, they're coming in. And so what we do is that we work with the owners as well to educate them on the process and what they need to do. So they come in. They're required by state law to do that. There's no city ordinance on that. But
for the year?
The year notification, that's correct, and a 6 month. And so for the city properties, city finance properties, usually there's no tenant protection mechanism except for the RSO. So we do follow the state notification. We work with the residents and the owners, and then from there we identify the properties that are under the RSO, and we treat them a little bit different than properties that are not under the RSO. And then the whole tenant outreach and education and enforcement actually procedures, that's when they begin. And those for the properties that do provide notifications. For those that don't provide notifications, since we're already tracking them, very proactively tracking them, we go out there and actually talk to the residents, but also talk to the owners ahead of time.
And so on this team from HUD, from HCID, I should say, just you two, or you got a team of 10 out there doing this, or just you, or who's?
This is the outreach team, and Lamano is the point person for the negotiations, and at some point then it becomes a bond finance or refinance, then it goes to our bond group or goes through our trust fund.
That's a good question. Actually, we've got a transaction working in CD7 that took a village. It's expiring in June, but we've had resources from portfolio management, preservation, occupancy monitoring, all working with this particular owner who needs some financial relief.
How many units are involved? How many units are involved?
Oh,
I'm just curious.
15.
Okay.
15 units, but we've had 20 contacts, and that means meetings, phone calls, whatever. And at the end of the month, we'll be closing a transaction, an amended loan agreement that will basically keep that project affordable total 2034.
Nice.
So it's, even though you see two people here, the whole department's looking at it. We all work together.
Good.
Also speaks to the overall number over the 5-year period. We talk about 150 properties. Doesn't sound like that many, but when you factor in the amount of time is spent on negotiating these deal points, that's assuming they're interested, it's quite extensive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this very thorough report. We love data, and there's lots of it here. And I know it wasn't easy to get. I wanted to ask if any of the three of you were comfortable speaking about having done such a good job with the quantitative analysis. Could you talk some about talk more about the qualitative analysis? So, specifically, what sort of feedback were you getting from landholders? I would love to hear that. And then specifically as it relates to folks who wanted to move into the market rate, it seems to me you have situations this seems especially true in my district, which is, I have opinions, but I'd love to hear what you all did after actually doing the science. So people are prepared to take the risk of moving into the market rate arena.
Right.
Sometimes not knowing the unstableness of the job market, so knowing that you might get somebody that doesn't have a job and you might be in and out. Also not entirely sure you're going to get more money right away. Did people give reasons for that, or did they talk about what decision-making process they went to arrive at that?
I want to speak to that, but what we found, though, is it really depends on the location of those properties. There's some areas that are hotter than others, so you will see almost like a speculative approach. They know what the trends are in their community, and they're far better positioned to take it to market and take that risk. I think that there's possibilities down the line to potentially, approach them at a later point to buy down. But once they've left, it's hard to get them back in. It's really hard to put genie back in the bottle. But it's primarily speculative. But there's some of them are, like as it was stated, are just hesitant because it's not. This is someone calling them out of the blue. They rarely have government calling them to begin with, and it sounds like a sales call, and actually it is. And getting them comfortable with that, it's going to take several bites at the apple before we can get some people comfortable with that. It could be they're just hesitant because this, who is this person from the city? So there's that, but others and others are just they know exactly where they want to go, and it's market rate.
Yeah, Rushmore. Yeah, there are. As Rushmore said, there are a lot of stories out there. Most of the owners that are not mission-driven, they're investors, have held these properties for a long, long time. They were all CRA buy-downs, I believe. As I said before, a lot of owners are thinking about estate planning at this point. They're looking at that and they're saying, do I really want to re-up? Do I want to do that at the 55 years? I don't think that makes sense. That's one segment. There are other investors that frankly say, you know what, I'm not in a hurry to raise rates a lot, but I don't want to deal with the paperwork anymore. I just don't want to deal with it. There's a lot of it there. And you have some younger owners that want to sell. It's like, great. In fact, I've got one in your council district, in fact. And I said, well, let me work with a CDFI, Century Housing, to get a nonprofit involved. Well, Mr. Lott, I like you, but you guys move too slow. I've got people that just went through and changed, and they have a boatload of money, and I really want to sell it, and I can't wait. So it's kind of the momentum of the market works against us to a certain extent.
So to follow up on I was expecting the answer about just not. Would be willing to even take less money and more risk to not have to fill out the paperwork.
And actually, it's not less money these days. It's
Right.
a little bit more money.
Okay.
Again, it's also. Do I really want to think about what you're offering me on a buy-down as compared to just taking my risk with the market? And so far, the market seems pretty good these days.
Did you all come away with specific reductions in the administrative burden and the bureaucratic burden that might make staying on our side of the ledger more appealing?
I think this is a work in progress, so I would say that the immediate answer is no. But as we get better at the negotiations and understand the deal points, and as we get see the trends from these property owners, I think that we'll be able to certainly speed up the process. the costs are what they are, but as far as the timing, that's where we need to be able to seize the market. And actually, as Mr. Lott indicated, we also try to find an opportunity to match those properties if they're really looking to go on the open market to sell, try to match them up with nonprofits, mission-driven organizations as well. It's just getting that process down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you. I think we need other conversations about language and what you need so that we can contact Sacramento and work with the Speaker's office, see if we get you that flexibility on the money.
Great. We'll work with your office on some specific language.
And then I think for us, we need to look at language that makes it easier for people to stay in the program, right? If you're telling us that there's too much paperwork, too much, right?
Great. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Public comment? Yes, sir. Do we have public comment? No. Item 6. Yes.
As I always say, I'm here representing black people, and I'm black. Now, I see what the problem is, why most of the black people are on the street homeless. The majority of the people running this housing department, even this agency who just left, they're Hispanic. 60% of you on it, you got the Hispanics on this panel. They outnumber the 2 blacks. So they rule. Cervantes, Hispanic, all up in the HCIDLA. I have a problem with that. We need more black people on these commissions, on this panel, and in that agency. I have a problem with Cervantes. He's the same guy that wanted to give a clerk typist over $100,000. I don't understand why they are in charge of taking violations. That is a conflict of interest. They could set up these properties, get violations, get the homes, and put illegals in them. That should be a separate department. That department should not be taking violation complaints.
Item 7.
Mr. Chair, item number 7, motion Cedillo et al. Regarding the homeownership assistance program.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Manuel Bernal, Director of Housing for the Housing Community Investment Department.
Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Torres with the Homeownership Unit, Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department.
Thank you.
So we want to give an oral presentation regarding our kind of 3 programs, the low-income purchase assistance program, the moderate income purchase assistance program, and the MCCs. And Gloria will do that. Then she'll also summarize some of the marketing efforts that we do for all 3 programs. But we're going to close with sharing some information, some anecdotal information we've recently received from our network of real estate professionals, our brokers, our lenders, which has led us to conclude that it's probably time to retool some of these programs as we're seeing that the market is tightening, and it's really time to maybe look at what else we can do or what our response should be. So in fact, I think this motion is pretty timely in that respect. So we'll close with that, but I'll have Gloria first summarize the programs that we run. We're going to distribute the...
Okay, so I'm going to discuss our most popular program. It's the Low-Income Purchase Assistance Program. It's a citywide program that provides a soft second or deferred loan to low-income homebuyers. We define low-income homebuyers as households that earn up to 80% of area median income. An example of that is a household of 4. The maximum limit is $66,400. So during the last 5 program years, we have funded 438 loans, utilizing various federal and state funding sources. In the last program year, we funded 83 loans for a total funding amount of $4.8 million. And we're averaging 6.9 loans a month, or a funding amount of $405,000. We have a pretty low fallout rate. Our fallout rate is approximately 12%, and that is primarily due to households being over the income limit. And we're currently utilizing home funds for the program. So This program is primarily concentrated in the most affordable areas of the city, such as Council District 8, 15, 9, 6, and 7. So that's where we see most of the activity. We have received recent feedback from our lenders and realtors and homebuyer education providers, and they have indicated that there is low inventory, so we have seen a slowdown with this program. The next program that we have is the Citywide Mortgage Credit Certificate Program. That's for low and moderate income home buyers. That goes up to 140% of area median income, and that provides a tax credit based on mortgage interest paid, which helps home buyers to qualify for a higher first mortgage. That tax credit is taken into account when underwriting, and it's used in combination with the LIPA program that I just discussed. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, before we do that, I mean, the funding for the MCC program really doesn't come from the city itself. It's an application that we do to the state, the CITLAC, which is the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. We apply roughly every 2 years for mortgage credit certificate funding, and we get it from them, and then we allocate it locally.
We received an allocation of approximately $30 million last fall, and we anticipate assisting about 170 to 180 families citywide. Okay. So then the next program that we want to talk about is a Moderate Income Purchase Assistance Program. This program was approved in 2005. It was a very popular program citywide. We funded approximately 363 loans for a total of $27.2 million. This program was designed to assist higher income families and workforce housing to encourage workforce housing. It assisted home buyers that worked as essential workers like teachers, medical personnel, entry-level law enforcement, entry-level firefighters. And the benefit of this program is that we were able to assist home buyers in various districts, almost all districts, council districts of the city. As I mentioned with the low-income program, those loans are primarily concentrated in South LA and East San Fernando Valley. But with the moderate income program, we were able to assist in districts such as CD1, CD14, CD3, and the others that are also affordable, as I mentioned, CD6, 7, 8, 9, and 15. But that is a benefit of the moderate income program, that we're able to exceed the 80% of area median income limits, the authority is up to 150% of AMI, although the majority of the loans were done up to 120% of AMI. And an example of that, for a household of 4, the income limit is $99,600. So that program allows more purchasing power.
So this is where I just going to close a little bit, and the graph that is being distributed today, right now, shows kind of compares two programs, the low-income housing program and the moderate income program. And the big takeaway is that on the left-hand side, you have a pie graph that is really skewed to a limited number of areas in the city. And that's, again, due to just the affordability in those areas. And those, again, that's a program that is capped at 80% of area median income. But on the right-hand side, you see the moderate income funding, moderate income program, right, where we're able to reach a higher income level through the moderate income purchase assistance program. And you'll see that distribution-wise is a little bit better, right? It kind of reaches a larger percentage of the city. The pie pieces are not as kind of either tiny or as large. All that to say is that I think we're at that point today. I should mention that the moderate income program currently does not have any funding in it. The only funding sources that the home ownership program currently has is really restricted. It's home money, which restricts it all the way up to 80% and below. So we can't reach families at that higher income level. We were able to reach that income level with previous year funding, and I think it was general fund money and some MHFF money. And that's how we ran the moderate income program. So it's totally possible, right? If we have a funding source that does not have those an 80% of AMI restriction, but rather a higher one, we can very easily kind of run this program again. And the results, again, is just a picture of what the results would be. We could reach a larger section of the city. As one last thing, and this is something that Gloria already mentioned, is that what we're hearing from our brokers today is that the inventory is really, really tight, even in the lower income parts of the city. So getting our current batch of 80% of AMI money is been slowing down. So we have actually started thinking about what adjustments can we make to the program to get the money out there faster. And there are really two adjustments we can make, and our thinking is that we need a little bit of time to kind of go through the analysis, the data analysis. But generally speaking would be to raise the amount of soft second that we provide. Currently it's at 60. We have authority to raise it up to 90. But we don't want to do that until we do some sort of formal data analysis. So that would increase the purchasing power of everybody that qualifies. But again, it will only be limited to families at 80% of AMI and below, unless we get a different type of funding source or an additional funding source that lifts that cap up to 120, let's say. And that, again, would be a different way of increasing affordability or increasing purchasing power in the homeownership programs. So our plan is to take a look at data over the next month or so and then come back with some recommendations. And that's why I meant that I think this motion is really timely in that effect.
Great.
Questions?
Questions? Okay, we have public comment. Thank you guys very much. Patricia McAllister.
Thank you. Based on this report here, this is unacceptable. We have 2 black members on this panel, and I don't hear them saying one thing about this home ownership loan program. I understand in current Price's district, half are Hispanic, half are black. He's not doing a darn thing. We're going to try to get you Negroes out of office. You got to help your people. You got this Mexican following you all around the building. You work for black people. You are not white. You're not Hispanic. I don't care what they tell you. You are Negro. And if I wanted to say the word they really call you, excuse me, this is my comment.
Ma'am, I am asking you to please identify the chair when you speak if I ask you to speak.
I don't like the
Ma'am,
fact
I
that-
am speaking here. You're taking my time.
You're taking my time. Oh,
Well, it's hold.
Okay, all right.
And Mr. Chair, the speaker has gone way off topic here. Through the Brown Act, the public commenter has the ability to speak on the subject before the agenda. The conversation that she's talking about is going way off topic, and we would appreciate it if we could have our public commenter speak about the item on the agenda. Thank
I don't
you.
understand why the African American community has the lowest.
Focus your comments on the policy and the
I
subject
am
matter.
talking about this chart
Not
here.
personalize this. Focus
I
on
heard what he said. You want to repeat it? Turn the clock off.
Focus on the subject matter and the policy.
I don't like the fact that African Americans have the lowest amount of home ownership loans. I think it's racism. I think we need to file a lawsuit, and this needs to be publicized.
Next. Thank you.
You just got here. You need to shut up and be here on time.
Lori Gay, you're out of
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask our, if there is a officer in the building that this person continues to disrupt this meeting, and that I would appreciate a warning to this individual
you're
so that she
warned.
could be all scared out if she continues to disrupt this meeting.
You are disrupting the meeting. You are warned. Ms. Gay, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Gentlemen, glad to be here supporting homeownership. Thank you for the motion. We find, too, that people of color have lower homeownership results than has been in the past. Cost matters. So what we're here to talk about, again, I offered to Rushmore Cervantes that we would match city money. As a community development bank, we see it as our job. We're the largest affordable homeownership provider in the region. It's not easy. It's not fun. It's not interesting. But it's necessary. We need the stability in our town. We only have about 37% of the families owning. Anything we can do, we're here to serve and help. And I think we can together attract a bunch of money that we haven't seen before, since owning and renting costs about the same now for families. So we're just here to thank you and then say, let's get going. And when do we start planning?
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
We were talking about you in Sacramento last week.
Thank you.
And this assembly has a program. We're trying to match up the program so that they're in sync. And we were talking about you. So the question is, how do we make people more aware of this? What can we do? What types of investments, communications, outreach do we need to do? Because the Senate
You mean to the
Assembly has
consumer or to
consumers.
The consumer piece is pretty easy. Homeownership is like a magnet. People are moth to a flame with it because they want to own. That's still one of the most cherished American values. So whether it's through social media, radio, TV, TV's a little scary because you can get 5,000 people in 2 loans. But radio we find is phenomenally effective. It's strategic. We also find email, phone, the same things Mr. Cervantes said his team is doing to reach landlords. And there are a lot of people who want to convert. What I would really suggest is a plan that's centered around private and public partnership. Employers need to be a part of this mix. It's the easiest thing in the world, but they have to know what's available. And so MIPA, Manuel talked about, that needs to be back because everybody can't do it if they're under 80%. That's a limited public opportunity given that home values are over $600,000 now. We're crazy in LA in terms of our pricing. So I think you've got the private sector component with employers and landlords, and then you've got your piece. And as a city, I think you have a phenomenal opportunity to lead. And you've got a number of us out here who've been struggling and stumbling along for some time. And we want to join with you now because the costs are too great. I would probably suggest to Manuel and Gloria that they think about keeping things at $60,000 and let the rest of us come in and round that number out so your money goes even further, just as an example. I got $30,000 a unit I can put in. You got banks that have money. You've got the state with a couple $100 million on their programs they're talking about right now. So the layering is there, but we do have to work together to figure it out and then stretch the numbers. My staff is calling 7,400 customers back right now who we served over the last 4 years. Half of those are homeowners we created. We're not special. We just had the right packaging. And I think we know we can't do it by ourselves anymore, which is why you see me showing up. Because the inventory is low and the costs are higher. And then some of us are developing again. I can't resist saying that to you because you asked the question. Let's streamline our development process and put some money aside for subdivisions and all kinds of fun, interesting things because you're never going to keep up with the number that are losing. You're back to 700 defaults in the city of LA per month. So, the housing supply issue, I think, if I'm candid, has to be watched as well.
Mr. Price?
What kinds of financial incentives are there for the homeowner, for the prospective homeowner?
You mean beyond 0%?
Well, that's
that's a
pretty
big
good.
one.
That's a real big one.
But I think
is there a grant, a piece of that now? Or
a lot of the banks are doing the WISH programs back. It's popular. Some of the banks are awful and don't know what they're doing, but that's $15,000 that is forgiven over 5 years. That's very popular again. And the Federal Home Loan Bank, that's an easy meeting for you. Get a set aside. They'll do that, but you have to ask. And they have to know the city is focused on it. And so that's why I'm saying you have a unique opportunity to rally people. That's one example. The Treasury has a chunk of money they're trying to put into some of the CDFIs for homeownership now. And then you've got an interesting group of people, since the lady before me commented on black people. The ethnic real estate groups are very focused on making sure that people of color are in homeownership. They have money. So it's getting those private folks. I can't think of any studio in this town who doesn't have people who should be homeowners. Their average wage, $50,000 to $80,000, is perfect. Your employees, perfect. So it's just lining that up, and I can't resist saying we're available for free to help you. So I don't know what else to say.
We need you. And your experience has been, though, that the the brokers, ethnic brokers especially, are tuned into these programs and are, or do we need to do
You're
more
going
to
a step
educate
further
them?
there. Yeah, they need to
I
be
mean, how do
educated,
they-
but
how do we get the
they
word
want
out
it. They want it. It's the first time they're talking to nonprofits aggressively because they're worried that there's not enough black people, not enough Latinos, not enough Asian families in homeownership.
Right.
And they know that as people lose and as the train comes to town, people get displaced. Everybody knows it, and they're worried about what to do. And so I know we've had a lot of conversation there, and I think they have different resources, different contacts, and it would be interesting to bring those things to bear and have us all share together. And then the numbers would go up, as she was requesting. But we also have to be candid that things need to be in language. There has to be an attraction, if I'm really candid, for young black people to want to own a home. They don't want to live in Crenshaw anymore if they can live at the beach. That's real. And so it's the same amongst the Latino population. Yuppies, puppies, chuppies. People have different interests now. But for those who do not, you still have families of 3 and 4 that want to be homeowners. And they're right there at the edge, and they just need a bump.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you. I know you didn't come to give testimony. You came to give public testimony. You weren't a part of the hearing, and invited guests to the hearing. But I think this piece is so important. From a homelessness and housing perspective, a lot of times we focus on the rental market, which is important because it gives people a foothold. But the only way families really develop wealth, particularly working class families develop wealth over generations, is that they can own a piece of the rock. And whatever we can do to make Los Angeles a place that's accessible to working class people, I think is extremely important, so that folks have something to leave to their families and can send grandkids and great grandkids to college and all the rest. So thank you for that, and we want to be as helpful as we can.
Thank you. Well, and I think the only other thing I'd say, I'd be remiss, some of us are looking at limited equity. And it's hard to talk about that in California. It's not something we've been comfortable with. But cooperatives and other forms of trust mechanisms to make it easier for families to have steps toward full-scale home ownership, I think, matter. And I don't claim to know all the answers there, but there's a lot of modeling that we're open to adapting.
Great. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Alex Vysotsky. Did I get that right?
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Lori has covered a lot of it, so I'll be brief. I'm here on behalf of Neighborhood Housing Services of LA County as well, and I really want to commend the committee and the housing department for drawing their attention to homeownership. Research tells us that when families become homeowners, they become more financially stable, their health outcomes are better, their children do better in school. As Councilmember Harris Dawson mentioned, this remains one of the few ways for low to moderate income families to actually build the wealth and assets that are needed to create opportunity for their children. But it's becoming harder and harder to achieve. The median home price in the city was $600,000 last month. In Jefferson Park, for example, where median household income is $30,000, the median sales price was $540,000 last month. So public programs and public resources remain as important as ever towards helping families achieve homeownership, and we appreciate your attention on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Crystal DaCosta. You can please join us. I got Crystal. I've got James. I've got. I cannot read your writing. There's an M in here. Deborah. Okay. Jim, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for introducing this. I'm James Litz, Government Affairs Director for the Beverly Hills Greater LA Association of Realtors. As you know, Realtors have been working diligently with this committee and the Homelessness Committee to help the city address the homelessness and affordable housing crisis. To say we fully support the city's current efforts to examine its first-time homebuyers program is an understatement. We would like to see the city expand this program and create greater opportunities for some of the hardest-working Angelinos to move from renting to purchasing. Since 2011, this program has funded over 500 first-time buyers. We would like to see that program increase not only in the budgetary allocations, but we'd like to see the program increase its loan amount to actually reflect the increases in median home price. We understand the home purchase limit is $432,500 or $432,250, which is far below the real median home price of over $500,000. And we're not talking about luxury homes. We're talking about bare bones starter homes that need a little work, and families that need a fresh start and the opportunity to invest in our city. And the Realtors remain committed to work on this program with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Crystal DaCosta, and I'm echoing the sentiments of my colleagues and the previous speakers. Really glad that there is conversation around workforce housing and home ownership, and not just the rental community. I'm also with the Beverly Hills Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, and I'm past public policy committee chair at the association. And as part of that, and a member of the Cultural Diversity Committee at the association, I know firsthand about financial literacy. We teach programs there. And I work with predominantly first-time home buyers. So this is very timely, and we are speaking in favor of the motion. It not only affects low-income residents, so I just want to say we do speak in favor of the motion, and we'd like to do anything we can to help you with that, if it's on an advisory level or anything we can do to help with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Deborah Bright-Laney, real estate broker, also past president of the Beverly Hills Greater LA Association of Realtors. We are in favor of this proposal here. Homeownership is a dream to some and mostly to all. And as an instructor for West Angeles CDC, where we do teach the classes for those that participate with this program, they have to take it. The classes are averaging about 50 people on a monthly basis or more taking this class. But however, once they take the class, because of the low inventory, because of the process, it's hard for them sometimes to obtain these houses. We need to have more inventory. We need to have the guidelines a little bit less stringent so that they can get, and we need to educate everyone about this program, even sellers, because as a realtor, most sellers are reluctant to deal with any buyer that presents an offer, a good offer, because they know that they're going to get down payment assistance. And we can do that through the schools, the colleges, all the graduates that are graduating, the churches. There's a number of places, as Ms. Gray mentioned, that we can use to promote this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Want to move the matter? To report? It's only ever.
The motion.
It's a motion.
Approve it.
Motion to approve. Karen, you want to second? Second motion?
I'll second.
Any objection? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, item number 8 is an
Thank you.
HCID verbal update relative to the Foreclosure Registry program.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair, Committee members, Roberto Aldape, Housing Community Investment Department. I'm joined by Helen Morales, Senior Housing Investigator, and she manages the Foreclosure Registry unit. To my right is Greg Kung. He's a Director of our Systems Division. And to my far right is Manuel Bernard, Director of Housing. We were asked to provide some brief data on the Foreclosure Registry. If I may, with permission of the chair, I'd like to divide this into 3 small parts.
Please.
The first part being the Foreclosure Registry data. The second part being the Foreclosure Information Maintenance System, otherwise known as the Foreclosure, as the Geo Registry. and the fourth part being the homeowner assistance program, which will be handled by Mr. Bernard. As many of you know, the city is still in somewhat of a foreclosure crisis. I have some data that would speak to us to some of the trends that we're seeing. Since approximately 2010, since the foreclosure registry was enacted during the housing crisis, approximately 56,000 properties have registered since that time. We annually register about 10,000 properties per year. The current trend is about 60% of those registrations are re-registrations. That means lenders are now re-registering every year, and 40% of those 10,000 are new registrations. Approximately 93% of those properties that are registered are in the NOD stage, notice of default. Only 7% are on the REO or the foreclosure stage. 80% of those properties that are registered are in our systems for 2 years or more. It seems like the banks are still holding on to these properties. In 2012, 99% of the properties in our registry were vacant. That has changed. In 2015, only 4% of those properties in the foreclosure registry are vacant. I think some of that has to do because of the national loan modification program that was going on, and people are staying in place, which is actually good because the intent of the foreclosure registry is to handle and deal with blight and nuisance property, so people in place are able to deal with that. As you know, the foreclosure registry, if you do not register the property within 30 days after we notify them, they're assessed a $250 penalty fee. To date, our penalty fee is about $4.6 million. But that is a downward trend. I think what we're doing because of our compliance efforts, that the banks are now, and the lenders are now registering without having to incur the penalty. I have a foreclosure registry property by council districts I'd like to hand out so that you can see the trend of the foreclosure registry properties by council districts. The highest, and I have it for 2016 currently, and from the inception of the foreclosure registry program from 2010 to 2016. The highest, registrations occurring on CD 7, 8, 9, and 10. Part of the efforts that we're doing to better track the foreclosure properties is to create a foreclosure information and maintenance system, otherwise known as geo-registry, and I'll turn over to my colleague, Mr. Kung, to talk a little bit about that.
Good afternoon, Council Member. Greg Kung, Director of Systems, HSID. I'd like to give you a report on the status of the current systems and what we are planning to do within the next version to improve its availability, functionalities, and etc. The current foreclosure information management system, we call it FIMS, has been in place since the program was shortly after the foreclosure registry program was went into effect in 2010. It has two parts. One is a public-facing website allowing the lenders and their representative to come online to register, to update information, and to provide contact information and inspection data on the properties that they register. It also allows the designated inspectors to go out to the field and use it on their mobile phones to record inspection data on a monthly basis. The same system also allows our foreclosure registry staff in-house in HSID to manage the data that we receive from the lenders and the inspectors, and also send out notices to notify them if they fail to register. So since the implementation of the system in 2010, we've made incremental changes and upgrade to the system to meet ordinance changes and administrative changes. And then since 2014, when the controllers issued an audit on the program, they made further recommendations to make enhancements to the system. And subsequently, the City Council instructed the department to work with the various departments in the city involved in the foreclosure, in combating blight in the city to implement a geo-registry system. We call that FIMS 2.0. It's the newer version of FIMS. So that system is now in development, and later this month we'll be ready for testing, and we're hoping to deploy it in July or August. What that system would do is will provide a map-based system, open to the public, not just to lenders and their representatives, open to the public and open to other city departments and also elected officers such as your offices, so that you can sign on, look up status, find out contact information, inspection status, and also submit service requests. So we accept service requests from anonymous constituents. If they choose to sign up, they can provide their contact information as well, and also from other departments. And with this, the system, we are hoping to integrate it with the city's 311, with the LADBS's inspection systems, so that we can better coordinate the service request effort. So, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So as the committee knows, back in 2015, the foreclosure registry ordinance was amended to include proactive inspections. The building and safety was granted a $356 inspection fee for REO status only single-family dwellings. I'd like to report to date, we've collected on behalf of building and safety about $340,000, which comes out to about 960 properties that they have inspected. In terms to deal with the blight and the nuisance properties. In terms of the multifamilies, that goes back into our regular SCAP, Systematic Code Enforcement Program, and our complaint-based program for multifamilies. And we already have a handle on that, so those are our core services that deal with those properties. As I said before, the penalty fees have, while we have about $4.6 million, this year we've only collected $133,000, which means there's a downward trend in terms of collecting those fees. So I would like Mr. Bernal to talk a little bit about how we can utilize those fees for short-term purposes for homeowners assistance.
The department actually has taken a look at the fees, the amounts, and taken a look at the different programs that we have available to fund. I mentioned that the 2 or the 3 core programs in my previous presentation under item 7. What I think that what probably will work the best in terms of leveraging these funding sources is to use them for, again, home ownership. And my understanding is that these funds do not have an income restriction. So we would take a look at to see whether we would reach a higher AMI level with these funds that today we can't because we're using the federal funds. So again, what our plan is to really review these funds, and when we come back to report back and make recommendations on the larger homeownership program, we'll incorporate some recommendations for that.
Thank you.
So we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So this would be like the optimum, right? These dollars, no caps on the homes purchase, no caps on the AMI, and most flexibility.
It wouldn't be quite optimal because it would still, I assume, be restricted to homes that are somehow in default or REO.
Within that inventory.
Right. So it would reach a segment of the housing stock, but not everything. But again, it's from an income perspective, it does really widen. It can potentially widen the net.
That's how big is that community of homes that it would reach? Could reach?
There aren't specified inventory. It's the cash that's available, right? That the cash that's available that can be used for soft seconds for a higher income population.
Okay. All right. Colleagues? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much. See the report. Any other matters on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, have you handled general public comment or?
No, we're prepared for that.
Okay. No.
Other than that, any other matters?
General public comment.
No, Mr. Chair, we're just in public comment.
Okay, good. Patricia McAllister, you've been warned.
First of all, let me say, first of all, I'm a businesswoman, so don't take anything I say personal, but you know it's real. Now listen, I'm concerned about not just black people. I love all people, but I'm black, and I'm looking at District 14, Mr. Huzzar's district. Only 10 people got a home loan. When I see District 8, 133, District 1, 62, District 14, Huzzar has over 6,000 homeless people, and no other council district has more than 2,500. So for him to sit in here and criticize me, you need to be in your district helping your people. Those are 6,000 that's living on the street. This is public comment now. Those are 6,000 on the street. We're not talking about the other 20,000 living with mom and dad and uncles and aunts. Don't forget those people. We need to go in homes and start counting those people too who are living with relatives. We're going to come up with 10 or 15 million. We've got to get these illegal aliens out of this, not just California, out of this country. Donald Trump for president.
Motion to adjourn? So moved. Amen. Senator. Sure. I'll talk to you in a bit.